World geography, Europe, political boundaries. Here are the learning objectives. 1. What conditions led to World War I? 2. Describe the changes to the European map which occurred as a result of World War I. 3. Analyze how an Allied victory over Nazi Germany in World War II soon turned into a Cold War between superpowers. 4. Examine how ethnic loyalties led to the disintegration of the Yugoslav Federation. 5. Define ethnic cleansing and Balkanization. First World War. World War I. The Slavic nation of Serbia. It was interested in freeing the Slavs that were living under the rule of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Austro-Hungarian Empire at the time pretty much dominated the European map. So in 1914, when the Archduke Franz Ferdinand was visiting Serbia, a Serbian Slav assassinated him, and this was the spark that started the First World War, or World War I. The Austro-Hungarian Empire and Serbia, each group pulled their allies into the conflict, and that's why the conflict became global. Consequences of war. The consequences, the end result of World War I included: 1. Austria and Hungary split apart after the war. The empire collapsed. 2. Several European ethnic groups gained their independence, and new nations were born. Nations like Albania, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and Yugoslavia. And 3. The Ottoman Empire, the Islamic Ottoman Empire, collapsed and was replaced by the secular nation of Turkey. Here you have a map of Europe in 1914. World War I began in 1917, so this is just prior. You can focus on the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Notice how large it is. Notice how large Germany is. Pay attention to the Ottoman Empire. Now let's look at this European map directly after the war from 1919 to 1929. You can see that there really is no more Austro-Hungarian Empire. It's just a tiny nation of Austria, and that there are several new nations that have been born. Countries like Latvia and Lithuania and Poland, which seem to have been carved out of Russian territory. And then, of course, the new nation of Turkey. Second World War. Nazi Germany. Totalitarian and ultra-nationalist Nazi Germany attacked Poland in 1939, and this was the beginning of the Second World War, or World War II. Near the end of the war, in 1945, the Soviet Union, one of the Allied nations, advanced through Eastern Europe, and the United States and British and French forces advanced through Europe from the west. Their idea was to crush Germany from two sides. The Cold War. Satellite nations. Once the war was over, the war with Germany, the Soviet Union refused to withdraw from Eastern Europe. In fact, they set up sympathetic communist governments in the region. Eastern Europe then became a region of what's called satellite nations, and these are nations that are dominated by another country. Tensions continued to rise in Europe between the former Allies, and this led to what we know as the Cold War. NATO versus Warsaw Pact. The Cold War, which ran from 1947 to 1991, it's defined as a sustained state of political and military tension between the United States and its North Atlantic Treaty Organization partners, or NATO partners. So there was a military tension between the United States, NATO, and the communist world, which was led by the Soviet Union and its allies in Eastern Europe. The American and the Soviet superpowers had profound economic and political differences with one another. It was the free enterprise system versus communism. And the goal of NATO was to contain communism, prevent its spread to new countries. In defense of this NATO strategy, the Soviet Union, the Soviet bloc, formed what's known as the Warsaw Pact. There was never any direct military confrontation between the superpowers, mainly because both sides possessed nuclear weapons. And there was this idea that if both sides had nuclear weapons and they were launched, then both sides would be destroyed. So there was no point in actually going to war. This policy was called mutually assured destruction. Here's a Cold War map of the around the 1950s. You can see the NATO alliance is the green countries, and the kind of orangish countries are the Warsaw Pact, and then there's neutral nations. Soviet Union collapse. In the late 1980s, the Soviet Union developed severe economic problems. And Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, he started to make some necessary economic and political reforms. One of the things he did was to give Eastern European satellite nations more freedom. Immediately, countries like Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland, Romania, they decided to end communist control of their governments. And later, Bulgaria and Yugoslavia followed suit. Return to ethnic loyalties. Once communist control of Eastern European countries ended, people started to look in other places to determine what their identities were, and their loyalties returned to their ethnic groups. In the early 1990s, 4 of 6 Yugoslav republics voted to become separate nation states. The Serbian Republic, one of the main republics, one of the main provinces in the country of Yugoslavia, they objected to this bid for independence by the other Yugoslav republics, and civil war began. Other countries like Czechoslovakia peacefully split into the Czech Republic and the new country of Slovakia. Balkan Conflict. Yugoslavia torn apart. Slovenia and then Croatia, these were the first Yugoslav republics to leave the Yugoslav Federation, or the country of Yugoslavia. Inevitable conflict with the most powerful Serbian Republic. This led to hundreds of thousands of refugees. Later, conflict broke out in the other Yugoslavia Republic of Bosnia-Herzegovina. There were Serbs who lived in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and they wanted to remain a part of what remained of the Yugoslav Federation and form a greater Serbia. That was their goal. ethnic cleansing. The Muslims of Bosnia-Herzegovina, which were basically in the majority, they were driven from their homes, and many were murdered by Serbian irregular forces in ethnic cleansing operations. The 1995 Dayton Agreement ended the war, and it created two self-governing entities within Bosnia-Herzegovina, the Bosnian Serb Republic and the Muslim Croat Federation. Kosovo Liberation Army. In 1998, further turmoil in the Yugoslav Federation, or the former Yugoslav Federation. This time the turmoil is within the Serbian Republic. And the Kosovo Liberation Army, the KLA, fought for its independence for a majority of ethnic Albanians that were living within the Serbian Republic in a small province called Kosovo. Using military airstrikes on Serbia, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, ended up pressuring the Serbian dictator Slobodan Milosevic to end the violence in the province. Basically, he withdrew his troops. Balkanization. In 2000, Slobodan Milosevic, he lost Serbian elections, and the new authorities handed him over to the United Nations War Crimes Tribunal. He was put on trial for crimes against humanity and genocide. 6 years later, the Montenegro Republic ended its union with Serbia and declared independence. At this point, there was no more Yugoslav Federation. We refer to the territory now as the former Yugoslavia, and it has several new nations within it. Regional hostilities are often described by the term Balkanization. Balkanization means to divide a region into smaller hostile states, because this is what's happened in this Balkan region where there was a country called Yugoslavia. Now there are several smaller hostile nations. Here you have a map of the former Yugoslavia. You can identify these are the former provinces, but now they're nations. You have Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Macedonia, and then you can determine the outline of Serbia on this map. And if you look in the bottom of the Republic of Serbia, you see the province of Kosovo. The end. Thank you for listening.